The morning bell at Low Country Middle School rang with the same mechanical chime it always did. Flat, predictable, ignored by everyone except the hall monitors. Room 2B sat at the far end of the east wing, its windows fogged by the dew of a humid Charleston morning. It was a Wednesday, quiet as ever, and inside the math classroom, the rustle of papers and the hum of adolescent restlessness filled the air. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Darius Wynn sat in the last seat of the third row, almost fused with the wall. His back straight, eyes low, pencil resting on the desk untouched. He had been there since September, and most of his classmates still didn't know the sound of his voice. His silence wasn't out of fear. It was a decision, a learned defense. Life had taught Darius that in a world like his, silence was often safer than being noticed. 13 years old, with old soul eyes and a sharpened awareness of how the world worked, Darius wasn't like the other boys in school. He didn't dress loudly, didn't fight for popularity, and never corrected a teacher, even when they were wrong. He simply watched, listened, and when a problem hit the whiteboard, he processed it faster than anyone else in the room. But Darius never raised his hand. He never turned in homework either. It wasn't laziness, it was strategy. Every evening, he sat at the small kitchen table in their one-bedroom apartment, working problems silently on scrap paper, while his mother counted tips from her waitress shift, and his younger cousins shouted at cartoons in the background. Darius memorized problems, rehearsed equations mentally, and when the next day arrived, he'd sit through class with the answers echoing quietly in his mind. Ms. Talley, the regular math teacher, knew he was special, even if she didn't fully understand him. But today, she was out sick. The substitute's name was Mrs. Renshaw. White, mid-40s, clearly unfamiliar with this particular classroom, she walked in with an armful of worksheets and a guarded smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The moment she scanned the room, her gaze paused just a second too long when it landed on Darius. Subtle, but Darius noticed. He always noticed. "All right, folks. This should be easy," she said, handing out thick worksheets. "I expect no talking, no phones, and no fooling around. I'll be watching carefully." Darius took the sheet quietly. It was simple. Slope-intercept form. Solving systems of equations. Basic algebra. By the time she finished distributing papers to the second row, Darius had already finished 10 of the 20 questions, without writing down a single step. His brain moved like water, smooth, fast, and uncatchable. Renshaw paced the rows with a sharp heel click, occasionally pausing to glance over shoulders. When she reached Darius, her steps slowed. She looked at his untouched pencil, his nearly complete worksheet, and the faint whisper of suspicion crept into her expression. "Darius, is it?" she asked, feigning warmth. He nodded once, eyes still on the paper. "You've already filled half of it out," she asked, eyebrows arched. "Without showing your work." "Yes, ma'am," he said, voice low. "I'd like you to show your work for the next 10. "Yes, ma'am." But he didn't. Not out of defiance, he simply didn't need to. He finished the page in his head, calmly jotting down only the final answers. To Darius, writing out the steps felt like being asked to explain how to walk. Some things just happened inside his mind. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Renshaw's discomfort grew louder than the ticking clock above the whiteboard. When she collected the sheets, her eyes scanned Darius's paper again. Neat. Correct. But something about him didn't sit right with her. Maybe it was his stillness. Maybe it was the way he didn't seek her approval, or how he didn't panic when questioned. But deep down, what unsettled her most wasn't the answers. It was the quiet confidence of a black boy who didn't play the role she expected. She glanced toward the door. Then she walked out. The room froze in confused silence. Minutes passed. A few kids whispered. Darius stared ahead, calm. He'd seen this before. When the door reopened, Renshaw returned, with Principal Everett behind her. Everett was tall, white, and chronically uncomfortable around conflict. His tie was crooked, and he smelled like stale coffee. His presence drew immediate attention. "Darius Wynn," he said, voice clipped. Darius stood, unsure if he was supposed to. "Yes, sir. Please gather your things. You need to come with me." There was no explanation, no visible reason. Just a firm directive that echoed through the room like a wrong note on a piano. "What did he do?" someone whispered. Everett didn't answer. Darius didn't ask. He picked up his backpack slowly, glanced once at the paper still on his desk, and walked out. The hallway was silent, except for their footsteps. When they reached the office, Everett motioned to the chairs outside his door. Darius sat, waited. 10 minutes passed. Finally, the principal stepped out and spoke without looking him in the eyes. Due to a suspicion of academic dishonesty, and after consultation with Mrs. Renshaw, we're placing you in in-school suspension pending review. Darius blinked once. For what? Everett exhaled sharply, as if burdened by the conversation. You turned in a worksheet, completed far too quickly, without showing your steps. That's not how this class operates. I got them right, Darius said. That's not the point. It always was the point, Darius whispered. Everett paused. That moment of quiet, too direct, too honest, made him visibly uncomfortable. You'll report to room 14B for the next 3 days. No classroom interaction, until further notice. It wasn't a punishment in name, but everyone knew what it meant. You didn't suspend a kid for being correct, unless you didn't like how he got there. Darius walked to room 14B, sat at the desk near the window and opened his notebook. He didn't cry. He didn't react. He just stared outside, wondering how it happened so fast. How brilliance turned into suspicion. How silence became guilt. How math, his refuge, had been used against him. He thought of his mother, of how she told him to be small, be polite, and never give them a reason. He had followed every rule, and still, here he was. Time passed. The school hallway buzzed with shifting class periods, and the dull clamor of footsteps. No one came to check on him. No one asked for his version of the story. Darius reached into his bag and pulled out a folded paper he had tucked in his notebook. Weeks ago, a complex equation he'd found in a college-level math book left behind at the library. He had been playing with it in his head for days. Today of all days, he needed the escape. He stared at it. Numbers, symbols, variables, like puzzle pieces in perfect formation. His lips moved silently, counting, rearranging. He didn't need a calculator. He never did. The equation unraveled in his mind like string coming loose from a spool. Suddenly, a creak in the room broke his focus. He looked up. The janitor, Mr. Griggs, an older black man who worked the afternoon shift, had wandered in early. He looked surprised to see someone there. His eyes fell on the paper in Darius's hand. What's that? Just math, Darius replied quietly. Griggs chuckled. That looked like spaceship stuff to me. Darius smiled faintly. I was just figuring it out. You already know the answer? Darius nodded, without even writing it down. Darius looked away, embarrassed. It's easier in my head. Griggs stared for a moment, then pulled a napkin from his cart and handed it over. Write it down just once. Let somebody see it. Darius hesitated, then took the napkin. He carefully wrote the full solution. Every step, every calculation. His handwriting was neat, small, disciplined. It looked like the notes of someone twice his age. Griggs stared at it, eyes wide, then slowly folded the napkin and slipped it into his pocket. He didn't say another word. He simply walked out. 10 minutes later, the napkin is placed on a teacher's desk, and it sets off a chain reaction that will rip the entire school open. The napkin left room 14B before Darius even realized it was gone. Mr. Griggs didn't look back as he walked the hall, his face carrying something between concern and awe. He knew what he held wasn't a doodle or a discarded scribble. It was evidence, proof, a quiet whisper of genius no one had bothered to hear. But inside the administrative office, a different script was unfolding, one already written, rehearsed and reflexively used against boys like Darius. By the time the lunch period began, 3 emails had already been sent, one from the substitute, one from Principal Everett, and one from a district behavior coordinator who had never met Darius, but felt fully confident describing him as non-compliant, defiant and behaviorally avoidant. No one asked why a child with no disciplinary record would suddenly become a disruption. No one wondered how a boy who barely spoke could be labeled aggressive. No one questioned how someone who never missed a correct answer could be accused of cheating. The narrative wasn't logical, but it was familiar. The school didn't need proof. They needed permission. Permission to be done with him. And they already had it. Inside room 14B, Darius sat in silence, staring at the corner of the empty classroom. The suspension room wasn't a space for reflection. It was a storage closet with desks, a holding cell for the inconvenient. He heard distant laughter in the hallway, His classmates were at recess. He was here.
The clock ticked loud enough to feel cruel.
He thought about the napkin. Not about who might see it, but about whether it mattered. In his experience, brilliance didn't protect black boys. Sometimes it endangered them. The intercom buzzed. Darius Wynn, please remain where you are. He was already sitting still. Meanwhile, a few halls away, Miss Tally, back from her sick day, head still throbbing, walked into her classroom and noticed something odd. A napkin, carefully folded, placed not on her desk, but centered on it almost like a warning or a gift. She opened it. At first, her brain resisted what she saw. It was a multi-layered equation, not from the standard curriculum, not even from the gifted program, far beyond both. A problem she recognized from her own graduate coursework. A problem she never finished. But here it was solved, step by step in small, precise handwriting. Her heart skipped. She whispered, "Who did this?" Mr. Griggs stepped in from the doorframe, arms crossed. A kid in 4. She blinked. Darius? Didn't write a single thing down before, Griggs said. Didn't need to. Worked it all out in his head. Tally stared at the napkin again, now with the weight of realization, shame, and something close to fear. Do they know? She asked quietly. Griggs shook his head. They're calling him a problem. She closed her eyes. She knew that tone, that label. Once it stuck, it rarely came off. Tally sat down at her desk. The napkin trembled slightly in her hand. This isn't a worksheet problem, she said. This is genius. Griggs finished. Yeah, I know. Back in room 14B, a shadow crossed the doorway. It wasn't Everett this time. It was Miss Darlene Hyde, the assistant superintendent. White, perfectly ironed dress, expertly controlled voice. She didn't sit. She didn't smile. Darius, I'm told you have an issue following instructions. He looked up slowly. I finished the work, he said. That's not the issue, she replied. It usually is. Her mouth tightened. Just a fraction. A crack in a porcelain mask. We've spoken to your teachers, she said. One concern is that you do not submit assignments. That creates inconsistency that teachers cannot accommodate. Even when I have the right answers? That's not how learning works, she said flatly. It's how my learning works, he replied. There was no defiance in his tone, only truth. But truth, when spoken without apology, reads as rebellion from the wrong mouth. Hyde exhaled. Darius, this is not a debate. You will remain here in suspension until we decide the appropriate next step. Then she left. She didn't ask what he needed. She didn't ask what he knew. Her mind was made the moment she saw him. A quiet black boy who didn't perform obedience. Case closed. The afternoon dragged into something heavier than time. Something like slow erasure. Down the hall, teachers whispered. Did he snap? I heard he cursed the sub out. No, he cheated. Probably had the answers on his phone. Kids like him always get caught eventually. No one questioned the version they heard first. By the end of the day, 3 teachers had already decided he wasn't gifted, just manipulative. 2 had mentally drafted recommendations to drop him to standard level math. 1 suggested he might benefit from behavioral screening. The bias was spreading faster than the truth. In the library, 2 girls scrolled through a group chat about him. He sits alone for a reason. Bet he's weird. He never talks to anyone. That's sketchy. They forgot he could hear. They forgot he had ears and a name. Darius sat alone, fully aware of something most kids his age never had to learn. Once someone decides you're the problem, every breath becomes evidence. Across the campus, Miss Tally made her own decision. She folded the napkin again, placed it carefully in her purse, and walked straight into Everett's office without knocking. We need to talk about Darius. Everett's jaw tightened. We've already placed him in suspension. He's not cheating, she said. You weren't here. I don't have to be here to know what he can do. This napkin, Everett raised a hand. Darlene already told me. She saw the napkin? She saw enough to make an administrative determination. Tally's voice sharpened. You're punishing a child because he solved something too fast. Because he didn't follow procedure. Everett corrected. He refuses to engage, refuses to adjust, refuses to show work. He doesn't need to, Tally said. He's doing calculus-level thinking in his head. And you're calling him uncooperative instead of gifted. Everett leaned back. There's a difference between genius and stubbornness. There's also a difference between discipline and discrimination, she replied. That one landed. Everett shifted, uncomfortable. I understand your passion, he said slowly, but this is beyond what one teacher's opinion can fix. There are processes, and those processes always seem to work well for everyone, except kids like him. For a moment, something cracked in Everett's expression. A flicker, a hint he knew she wasn't wrong. But instead of changing course, he ended the conversation. Thank you, Miss Tally. That will be all. She left with the napkin in her purse, and disappointment heavy in her chest. Not shock, disappointment. Because she had seen this before. Outside, the sky had turned gray, and the wind picked up the way it did before a storm, or something like one. Back in room 114B, the final bell rang, but Darius didn't stand. He wasn't dismissed. He stared at the empty space where the napkin had been, wondering whether it mattered now, whether proof ever mattered. Minutes later, the door opened again, this time without warning. It wasn't the principal. It wasn't Hyde. It was someone else entirely. A man in a tweed jacket, black, mid-30s, book under his arm, a stranger to this school. He stepped inside slowly, studying the room, then looking at Darius the same way someone might look at a flicker of light in a dark hallway. You're Darius, he said quietly. Darius nodded. My name is Dr. Harlan Poe. I teach mathematics at Charleston University. Darius blinked. You don't know me, Poe continued. But someone showed me your work. Darius said nothing. Poe placed the book on the desk beside him. You're not in trouble, he said softly. But I think you've been very misunderstood. Something shifted in Darius's posture. Small but real, like a locked hinge finally loosening. Would you mind showing me how you did it? Poe asked. Darius looked up, really looked. No one here asked, he said. I'm not them, Poe answered. For the first time all day, Darius nodded without hesitation. But before he could speak, something interrupted. The classroom door swung open again. This time, it wasn't a teacher or an administrator. It was a student, a girl from his math class, breathless, eyes wide, holding her phone like it was dangerous. You need to come see this, she said. Someone just wrote something on the board. Darius stood. The three of them stepped into the hall. Classroom 2B was empty now, but the board wasn't. Someone had written a new equation. Not homework, not classwork. Something far more complex. A challenge, a message. And Darius Wynn stared at it without blinking. He knew instantly. Someone had left it for him. But not who and not why. The classroom was silent when Darius stepped inside, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. Only Dr. Harlan Poe and the girl who'd fetched him stood near the whiteboard. The rest of the school had emptied for the day, lockers echoing from students rushing to buses and carpool lines. But here everything was still, like the room itself was waiting for him. The equation on the board wasn't a lesson. It wasn't something from the textbook. It looked like it belonged in a graduate seminar or a research conference. Variables stacked against each other, nonlinear structures, layered complexity, beautiful if math could ever be described that way. Dr. Poe stepped closer, eyes narrowing. This is not elementary algebra, he said quietly. The girl beside him swallowed. Mr. Dorsey wrote it, the honors math instructor, the one who had tried to solve the napkin problem earlier and failed. Darius stared at the symbols, tracing each segment with his eyes, absorbing its pattern, its rhythm. He didn't speak. Not yet. Poe broke the silence. You recognize it? Darius nodded slowly. It's wrong, he said. The girl blinked. Wrong? But this is honors level work. No, Darius said, eyes never leaving the board. It's college level. Except he stopped halfway. Poe raised a brow. You're saying this is incomplete? Darius didn't respond verbally. He stepped forward, grabbed a dry erase marker, and began writing. Not corrections but continuation, movement without hesitation, a hand guided not by guess, but certainty. The numbers flowed clean, crisp, exact. Poe watched in silence. It was like watching music instead of math. The girl whispered, How long did he study this stuff? Poe shook his head. You're asking the wrong question. It's not how long, it's how he sees. When Darius reached the end, he placed the cap on the marker and stepped back. Expression flat, heartbeat calm, breathing even. Like it cost him nothing. That's the answer, he said. Poe stared. How long did that take you? Darius thought. About while I was walking here. You solved it in your head? He nodded. The girl said it first. Soft, stunned. He's the smartest person in this school. Darius didn't react. Praise never sat comfortably with him. It felt temporary, conditional. Poe stepped closer, studying the answer. Then the structure. Then the transitions, substitutions, variable inversions, symbolic reductions. This isn't memorization, he whispered. This is comprehension at a level most college students can't even conceptualize. But outside the door, footsteps were approaching. Not calm ones, hard ones, sharp, irritated ones. Principal Everett stepped in, followed by the honors instructor himself. Mr. Dorsey, tall, tense, jaw clenched like praise was an injury. "Excuse me," Everett said, voice tight. "What is going on here? Why are students in a classroom unsupervised?" Poe turned, unbothered. "I asked him to demonstrate something." Everett shot a look toward Darius. Then the board. "What is that?" Dorsey moved forward, squinting. His face drained the longer he looked. That's my problem." "No," Darius said quietly. "Yours stopped here." He pointed to the midpoint. Dorsey stiffened. "You're telling me you completed it?" "I solved it," Darius said. "Show your work," Dorsey snapped.
I did.
"I mean step by step. Every stage. Write it out." "I don't need to write it out." Dorsey laughed, but it wasn't real laughter. "That's not how this works. You don't get credit for answers you can't prove." "I don't need credit." Poe stepped in then, voice steady, tone slow. He just demonstrated proof. In full. On the board. In real time. Everett looked at Poe sharply. "You don't have authority here." "No?" Poe said, looking him directly in the eye. "Then let's talk authority." He pulled a card from his coat. "Professor Harlan Poe, Department of Mathematical Theory, Charleston University." Everett's face paled. Dorsey crossed his arms. "Even if what he wrote is mathematically correct, it doesn't change that he's been defiant, non-participatory. He refuses to conform to academic expectations." Poe's voice sharpened. "You assigned a problem you yourself couldn't solve. And when a child solves it, you call him defiant." "I expect proper procedure," Dorsey said. "You expect compliance," Poe countered. "There's a difference." Everett stepped in, trying to regain control. "Mr. Poe, we appreciate your passion, but this is a behavior issue, not an academic one." "And who defines the behavior?" Poe asked, voice level. "The same people who never asked him how he thinks? The same people who assumed quiet meant trouble, silence. But not soft silence. The kind that stings." Dorsey turned to Darius directly. "You can't pretend to be a genius just because you know shortcuts." Darius looked at him, finally, fully. "It's not a shortcut," he said. "It's just faster in my head." Dorsey scoffed. "That's impossible." "It's memory," Darius replied. "Pattern recognition. Spatial retention. I can see the whole structure. I don't have to write it down." Poe watched him with something close to awe. "Do you know what that's called, Darius?"
No.
"Extraordinary." The girl smiled. Small, but real. But Everett was done listening. "You need to leave the premises, Dr. Poe. You were not authorized to interact with students." Poe held his ground. "And you need to rethink how you classify gifted children before you destroy another one." Everett ignored him. Turned to Darius. "You are not permitted to return to the mainstream classroom until we complete a behavioral assessment." It landed like a sentence. Not because it was surprising. Because it wasn't, Dorsey added. "And don't even think of joining the honors math group. We expect rigor and discipline." The girl stepped in, and she didn't mean to be brave, but she was. "He's smarter than all of you." Everett shot her a warning look. "Watch your tone." Poe stepped between them before the tension could escalate. "This isn't discipline," he said. "This is punishment for ability that threatens your assumptions." Everett opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the janitor appeared in the doorway. Mr. Griggs, still holding something in his hand. The napkin, folded, flat, quiet. He walked past Everett, past Darcy, past Poe, straight to the desk. He placed the napkin down. "Thought you might want this," he said to Poe. Poe unfolded it. Looked again. "Is this the same problem?" Darius nodded. "You solved it twice?" Poe asked. "No," Darius said simply. "I solved two different problems." Dorsey leaned forward. "That's not even possible." "The first one was harder," Darius said. Poe stared at him. Everett said nothing, because he didn't understand what was happening. Dorsey did, and that terrified him. Finally Poe spoke, not to Everett, not to Dorsey, to Darius. You don't belong in detention, he said. You belong somewhere that sees you. But before Darius could reply, Miss Tally burst into the room. She looked pale, unsteady. Something happened, she said, breath-catching. They've escalated the suspension. They want him out of school. What? Poe asked. On what grounds? She swallowed. They're calling it academic misconduct. But that's not all. They're adding a behavior note. Her voice broke. They're classifying him as oppositional. Everett didn't deny it. He didn't need to. It was already done. For a moment, no one moved. Then Mr. Griggs turned slowly, deliberately to Everett. You're pushing him out because he's smarter than you'll ever be. Everett stiffened. Watch yourself. No, Griggs said quietly. Watch him. He pointed at Darius. Because one day you'll tell this story like you discovered him. Not like you tried to bury him. Silence again. But this time everyone could feel it shifting. Like something in the building had cracked. Darius stood there. Not afraid. Not defeated. Just awake. Fully awake. Dr. Poe folded the napkin, slipped it into his jacket pocket, and looked Everett in the eye. You just made a mistake, he said. Everett's face tightened. You have no authority here. Poe smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You're right. Then he reached for his phone. But I know someone who does. Within minutes a call is made. Not to the district. Not to the school board. But to someone who knows exactly what a mind like Darius's is worth. And what it means when a school tries to erase it. It started quietly, like most storms do. Someone snapped a photo of the napkin. Not staged. Not polished. Just an accidental capture of brilliance scribbled in blue ink, sitting on the edge of Miss Tally's desk, next to a cup of cold coffee, and yesterday's attendance roster. The handwriting was neat, but unassuming. No name attached, just symbols, steps, conclusions that danced between abstraction and clarity. By third period, the photo had made its way into the staff group chat, posted by a curious young science teacher, who captioned it with, "Can anyone tell me what this is? Looks like calculus, but from a middle schooler?" The reactions came in waves. Wait, what is that? Who wrote this? This isn't real. One teacher asked if it was AI generated. Another assumed it was a prank. But Miss Tally saw it, quietly, from across her desk, and froze. That's Darius's napkin, she whispered. Her voice barely made it past her lips. She hadn't meant for the photo to get out. She'd only stepped away for a moment. But now the image was out in the world, bouncing from inbox to inbox, recaptioned and recirculated, growing louder with every share, like a secret too powerful to keep quiet. Some teachers saw it as a marvel. Others saw it as a mistake. But one person saw it and knew exactly what it meant. Her name was Dr. Celeste Jordan, a brilliant black adjunct math professor at Langston County College, underfunded, overlooked, and still running circles around her tenured peers. Years ago, before the budget cuts, she used to volunteer as a tutor at Low Country Middle. She had always kept an eye on the school even after leaving. Partly out of nostalgia, mostly out of obligation. She received the photo from a former colleague at 9:40. By 9:17, she had called the school. No one answered. By 9:23 she was in her car, keys shaking in her hand. By 9:47 she was standing in the front office, voice calm but eyes electric. I'm here to speak with the student who wrote this, she said, holding up the printed napkin photo. The secretary blinked. Are you a parent? No. An employee? No. Then I'm afraid you can't just... I used to tutor here. My ID should still be in the system. We'll need to call the principal. Do that. She didn't sit down. She stood by the trophy case eyeing dusty plaques from decades past, none of which bore black names. When Everett arrived, she didn't wait for pleasantries. Where is he? Excuse me, the student who wrote this. Everett blinked, caught off guard by her certainty. I don't believe this is a matter. It's not a matter. It's a miracle. And you're burying it. Everett cleared his throat, trying to regain footing. I assure you this is being handled through the appropriate channels. Celeste narrowed her eyes. Is that why he's in suspension? He faltered. We're investigating allegations. From whom? From a substitute teacher. And did anyone verify the claim? He hesitated. Celeste stepped closer. You're telling me that a black child solves a problem so advanced your staff doesn't even recognize it, and your first instinct is punishment.
Everett bristled.
We must ensure academic integrity. No, she said. You must ensure comfort. Silence. She didn't wait for his permission. She walked down the hallway as if it still belonged to her, toward room 14B, where the door was cracked just enough to see a boy sitting alone with a pencil, staring out the window. She stopped at the threshold. "Darius?" He turned, and something passed between them. Not recognition. Not yet. But something deeper, like a shared frequency only they could hear. She stepped inside, sat across from him. "Did you write it?" she asked softly. He didn't speak, just nodded. "You solved it in your head?" Another nod. She looked down, composed herself, then whispered, "You don't even know what you've done, do you?" Darius tilted his head slightly. "It was just a problem." Celeste smiled, but her eyes were glassy. "That's what all geniuses say." He didn't answer. His silence wasn't fear. It was caution. She took a deep breath. "I used to tutor here, years ago. Kids like you always got pushed aside. They never saw you for what you really were. I'm sorry." Darius looked away. "I don't talk much."
You don't have to.
A beat of silence. Then, "Do you want to get out of here?" He looked up. "I don't mean leave school," she clarified. "I mean, be seen, be understood." For the first time, his expression cracked. "I don't think they want me seen." Celeste reached into her bag and pulled out a phone. "I want to send your napkin to someone. Someone who matters. Will you let me?" Darius hesitated. "Will it make them angry?"
Probably, she said, but it might also change your life.
He nodded. "Then do it." She snapped a high-resolution photo of the napkin. Then she paused, thinking, fingers hovering above her screen. There was only one person she trusted. Dr. Isaac Marlin, one of the most respected minds in theoretical mathematics, chair of the Quantitative Research Institute in Boston, a man who rarely responded to emails unless they came from journals or grant boards. But he owed Celeste a favor. She attached the image and wrote, "Look at this. Middle school. Charleston. No coaching. Raw. Full steps on a napkin. You know what this means. Sit." Then she hit send. 5 minutes passed. No reply. 10 minutes. Still nothing. She stood to leave, unsure whether she'd crossed a line or planted a seed. But before she reached the door, her phone buzzed. One word. Call. She stepped out into the hallway, pressed his number, and waited. He picked up after 2 rings. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "No. Hello. No small talk. Student. Local school. Punished for solving a problem too fast. Name. Darius Wynn." Silence. Then, low and slow. "This is not just talent. This is redefinition." Celeste felt a lump in her throat. "I know. Get me everything," he said. "Handwriting samples. Past work. Classroom video if you can. This kid, he's what we spend our careers trying to find. He's already being erased. Then we rewrite the record," Marlin said. And Celeste, "Yeah? Keep him close. Someone's going to try and shut this down." She hung up, heart pounding. Inside the school, Everett was in his office, frantically drafting a statement to the district, trying to get ahead of what he didn't yet understand. Outside, Celeste leaned against the brick wall and watched students pour into buses, oblivious to the storm quietly gathering around them. The napkin had traveled further than anyone expected, but the boy behind it, he was just getting started. That night, Dr. Isaac Marlin forwards Darius's napkin to a confidential mailing list of elite mathematicians, and within hours, an encrypted reply lands in his inbox. "We've seen this style before. Where exactly is this kid from?" This isn't the first time he solved something off record. Darius had always known that silence wasn't just a habit. It was armor. He learned it in the back seat of a police car when he was 6, holding his mother's trembling hand while watching his father face the pavement with knees in his back and flashing red and blue reflections dancing across his skin. There were no sirens before it happened, no reason given until long after. They said the taillight was broken, but it wasn't. They said he looked nervous, but he wasn't. They said there had been a robbery nearby, and he fit the description. The description, Darius would later understand, was simple. Black male breathing. His father never made it back home. The system worked swiftly. No priors, no violence, but a forced confession extracted during hours without counsel. 3 years of prison for a crime that didn't happen, served quietly, while the court-appointed lawyer chased a backlog of cases that blurred into each other. Darius remembered visiting him once. Just once. The cold bench, the glass wall, the way his father smiled with his mouth but not his eyes. After that day, his mother stopped taking him. From then on, silence became law in their home. Don't ask questions at school. Don't talk back to teachers. Don't walk too fast or too slow when they call your name. Don't ever forget that a wrong look can turn into a wrong charge. His mother, Tanisha Wynn, worked 2 jobs and carried the kind of exhaustion that didn't show in her face but lived in her bones. She worked late shifts at a diner downtown and early mornings at a dry cleaner. Every Sunday, she'd iron his school clothes, lay out his notebooks, and whisper reminders in a voice that cracked around the edges. Stay small, baby. Let him overlook you. It's safer that way. And he listened, because he saw what not listening cost. He shrunk himself in class, answered only when directly called. He taught himself how to memorize whole units of math in his head, so he wouldn't need to raise his hand and draw attention. Every problem he solved silently was one more he didn't have to explain. But brilliance, no matter how buried, doesn't stay hidden forever. Especially not now. After the napkin spread, whispers turned into conversations. Teachers began glancing his way with puzzled expressions. A few whispered in break rooms about the quiet genius in the hoodie. Some were skeptical. Some were intrigued. But none of them really saw him. Except Dr. Celeste Jordan. She saw through it all. She returned to the school the next morning, not with a clipboard or district badge, but with purpose in her stride and fire in her chest. She wasn't there for interviews or press. She was there for Darius. They sat together in the counselor's office, the door slightly ajar, the school day humming in the background. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and worry. You know they're afraid of you, she said softly. Darius kept his gaze on the floor. Not because you did something wrong, she added, but because they don't know how to handle someone like you. Someone like me? He asked. Not defensively. Just tired. Someone they didn't expect. Someone they didn't plan for. He looked up. There was a bruise in his expression, not physical, but emotional, worn and quiet. I didn't want any of this, he said. I just wanted to go to class. I know. I didn't even tell anyone about the napkin. I know. They keep saying I broke rules, because they can't admit they broke expectations, she replied. He blinked. She leaned forward, her voice lowering to a murmur. They wanted you to follow a script, but you flipped the whole page. Outside, the intercom buzzed faintly. Announcements. Lunch menus. The typical rhythm of a school trying to act normal. But everything had changed. At the same time, miles away in Boston, Dr. Isaac Marlin was staring at his laptop. Eyes locked on the image Celeste had sent. He had printed it out, taped it to his office wall, annotated it, cross-referenced it, and now he was pacing. The equation wasn't just advanced, it was familiar. Not because he'd seen that specific version before, but because the method, the approach mirrored the structure of a long-abandoned proof. One that had baffled elite minds for over 40 years. A problem from a mathematical theory called combinatorial flux dynamics, once thought to be unsolvable without computer simulation, something only a handful of theoretical experts had even attempted to crack. But here it was, on a napkin, from a 13-year-old. He picked up the phone and called Celeste. This isn't random, he said. I didn't think it was. No, you don't understand. The way he transitions steps, the substitutions, it's the same logic framework used in the Fresconi conjecture. But no one's looked at that thing since the 90s. You think he's stumbled into rediscovering it? Not stumbled. Worked his way there. It's not copied. It's built. You can see the structure evolve. He's not mimicking. He's thinking. Celeste was quiet for a beat. Then she said what neither of them had dared to say aloud until now. You think he might be the one to finish it? Marlin didn't hesitate. I think he already had. Celeste covered her mouth, breath catching. Marlin continued. We need him in a protected environment, not just gifted education, a research mentorship, access, safety, guidance. And what if the school won't let go? Marlin paused. Then we make noise. They can't ignore. Back in Charleston, Darius walked the hallway under escort, not because he was dangerous, but because Everett didn't want him alone, where reporters or teachers could ask questions. The school board had already begun whispering about containment, distraction, and liability. Their priority wasn't discovery, it was damage control. Tanisha had been called to the school twice already. The first time to be warned. The second to be reminded that any unauthorized media exposure involving a minor could violate school policy. She had smiled politely, then gone home and packed a file box with every one of Darius's notebooks from kindergarten to now. Because when the storm came, She wasn't going to be unprepared. And the storm was near. That afternoon, a sleek white envelope arrived in the front office of the school. No return address, just a single sheet inside, with one question in bold black letters. Do you know what you have sitting in your detention room? No signature. No sender. Attached was a fresh printout of the napkin solution, now bearing red annotations from an MIT associate professor and a Stanford graduate researcher, both confirming, this method is original, possibly revolutionary. When Everett read it, he didn't speak for a full minute. Then he shredded the paper, but not fast enough, because the secretary had already taken a photo. That evening, as Tanisha tucked Darius in with her usual quiet prayer, her phone buzzed. A new email, subject line, request for collaboration from the Office of Theoretical Research, Cambridge, MA. And underneath it, is this the boy? Attached was Darius's napkin. Scanned. Circulating. And now in the hands of the world. The walls of Low Country Middle School had never felt so thin. It started with murmurs in the hallway. Teachers whispering near coffee machines, eyes flickering toward room 14B more than usual. There was a different energy now, an uneasiness that hung heavy between the classroom doors. And at the epicenter of it all sat a boy, still in detention, still silent, still unknowingly rewriting the rules. But while Darius solved equations quietly, forces far above him were unraveling. In the district's administrative office across town, 7 members of the Charleston Unified School Board had gathered around a long, polished table. The air conditioning hummed too loud. The blinds were drawn. On the table sat 3 stapled reports, a copy of the now circulating napkin image, and a list of staff members suspected of leaking internal communication. No one was smiling. Board President Lois Grantham, a seasoned political strategist turned education administrator, scanned the room with tight lips. This is a containment issue, she said. Not a celebration. The newest board member, a younger black man named Malik Rowe, raised an eyebrow. Containment? A student just solved a graduate-level problem from memory. Shouldn't that be front-page pride? Grantham didn't flinch. Not if it becomes a lawsuit. Rowe leaned forward. Why would there be a lawsuit? A pause. A silence that spoke. Grantham exhaled. Because we suspended a child for showing evidence of brilliance. Because the optics are dangerous. Because the parent is working class, and reportedly already angry. Because civil rights attorneys will get involved if this escalates. Another member, Charles Denning, older, white, retired military, crossed his arms. I say we clarify the suspension was due to procedural defiance. He didn't follow the rules. End of story. Rowe scoffed. He solved a problem none of our staff could. But sure, let's bury the math behind bureaucracy. We need to protect the institution, Grantham said coldly. No, Rowe replied. You want to protect your reputation. There's a difference. Grantham shot a look across the table. I'm issuing a gag directive, she said. No faculty or staff is to comment publicly. No social media engagement. No media interviews. Rowe leaned back in his chair. You realize that makes it look worse, right? You're not just silencing a student now. You're silencing the truth. Grantham didn't answer. She turned instead to the district's legal advisor, who had been flipping through notes without looking up. We'll draft a formal statement by end of day, she said. Frame it as a review of academic protocol. That'll buy us time. Time for what? Rowe asked. To get ahead of the press, Grantham replied. But it was already too late. Because outside those walls, the press had already begun to circle. Back at Low Country, Principal Everett was on edge. His phone buzzed every 20 minutes. Some calls from district heads, some from reporters he couldn't legally speak to, and one earlier that morning, from the superintendent himself asking in veiled terms if Darius's suspension could be reclassified in the system. Everett had hesitated, but not for long. He typed it in. Category behavioral disruption. He didn't ask himself what that would do to Darius's future record. He didn't consider how many black boys had had their educational paths erased by those 3 words. He just needed the chaos to stop. In room 14B, Darius stared out the window, watching a bird land on the flagpole. The sky was gray, but calm. His desk was still covered with old worksheets no one expected him to fill out. He hadn't spoken in hours, not since his mother dropped off a packed lunch with a quiet hug and tired eyes. He didn't know what was happening outside. Didn't know his name had already crossed inboxes in Cambridge, Berkeley, and Atlanta. Didn't know a Harvard postdoc had started tracing his problem-solving sequence and found it aligned eerily with unpublished work from a think tank in Switzerland. All Darius knew was that silence was safer, so he kept quiet. Until Miss Tally walked in. She wasn't supposed to visit him. The new district orders were clear: minimal contact with faculty. But Tally didn't care. She stepped in during her lunch break, closed the door gently, and sat across from him like she had in her early years teaching gifted students back when budgets still allowed them. "Hey," she said softly. Darius looked up, startled. "Just wanted to check in." He nodded once, said nothing. "You okay?" He hesitated. Then, "They think I cheated." She shook her head slowly. "No, they know you didn't. That's the part that hurts most." Darius looked at his hands. Tally leaned closer. "You know, when I was in college, I met a boy like you. Not just smart, different. Could build complex systems in his mind. He dropped out junior year. Said the system never made room for someone like him." "What happened to him?" "He left math. Works retail now." Darius stayed quiet. "I don't want that to be you," she said. He met her eyes for the first time in days, then said quietly, "They don't want me here. They're scared of what you can do. That's not my fault." "No," she said, "but they'll try to make it yours." At that moment, her phone buzzed on the desk. She glanced at the screen, and her face changed. Darius noticed. "What is it?" Tally's voice dropped to a whisper. "An email. Someone leaked a staff memo. A journalist got it. About me." She nodded. "They're calling it academic suppression, racial profiling in education." Darius felt his stomach twist. He had just wanted to go to class, do math, think in peace. Now the world was watching. Meanwhile, across town, in a one-bedroom apartment on Vine Street, Tanisha Wynn sat at her small kitchen table, with a laptop open and a list of calls she hadn't returned. There were voicemails from reporters, a message from a civil rights group, 2 from a local podcast, and one name she didn't recognize. Lisa Monroe, investigative reporter, The Observer. Tanisha clicked play on the voicemail. "Ms. Wynn, I used to cover race and education for the Tribune before I transitioned into long-form investigative work. I've seen the emails from the district. Someone sent them anonymously. I don't know if you've read them, but you need to. They detail internal conversations about your son, about burying this story, about reclassifying him. I'm not asking you to go public, but I want you to know that I see him, and I see you. Call me if you want the truth out there." Tanisha sat still for a long time. Then she opened the file attached to the email. What she read made her chest tighten. Lines from the principal, from the superintendent, from board members. "Do we have legal cover if the mother pushes back? Can we delay academic testing to avoid media flare? Frame it as non-compliance, not racial." Her hands trembled. For years she had fought quietly, worked double shifts, stayed polite, told her son to keep his head down. But now they were trying to erase him on paper. Not just his future, his legacy. She picked up her phone, scrolled to the unknown number, and called Lisa Monroe. "I'm ready," she said. "Let's talk." That night, as the school board prepped their official press release, The Observer dropped a bombshell. Exclusive Charleston district leaked emails show deliberate attempt to suppress black students' academic breakthrough. And under the headline, Darius's napkin. Front and center. Now a symbol. Now a spark. Erica Van hadn't touched a school story in almost 6 years. Not since her expose on racialized discipline disparities in upstate New York had triggered death threats and anonymous letters shoved through her apartment mail slot. That story had cost her more than sleep. It had cost her peace. It took her nearly a year to step away, to build walls around herself, to swear she'd never again chase ghosts inside American classrooms. But the email changed everything. It had no subject line. Just an anonymous tip, a PDF of redacted school board emails, and a photograph of a napkin scribbled with math so advanced, Erica had to forward it to her academic cousin at Princeton just to verify it wasn't gibberish. He texted back 2 minutes later. "This is real. This is advanced combinatorics. Who is this kid?" Erica didn't reply. She was already looking up flights to Charleston. By morning she was there. No fanfare, no media badge, just a plain notebook, an audio recorder, and a silent promise that if this story hurt even one more child like the ones she'd spent a decade writing about, she wouldn't blink before burning the whole lie down. Low Country Middle looked unremarkable from the outside. Red brick, chipped signage, tired landscaping. But as Erica walked its hallways unannounced, shadowing a sympathetic counselor she knew from years past, she felt it, that thrum of discomfort schools get when they know they've been caught. The hush behind closed doors, the tight smiles of staff who knew not to speak, the posters on the walls that shouted about equity while erasing the boy who had become the eye of the storm. She met Darius Wynn at a diner 2 blocks away. They sat across from each other in a vinyl booth, steam rising from coffee cups. Neither of them drank. "Why now?" Tanisha asked, voice calm but tired. "After all this time, why is everyone suddenly interested?" Erica met her gaze. "Because now they can't ignore him." Tanisha nodded. "But they could before." "They did." Erica didn't argue. Instead, she slid her recorder closer. "Tell me everything," she said. Tanisha did. The wrong traffic stop. The court-appointed silence. The warnings she whispered to her son every morning before school. How she taught him to shrink himself into spaces that wouldn't welcome him. How she feared brilliance would paint a bigger target on his back. "I told him to be invisible," she said, her voice cracking. "Because I didn't know if he could survive being seen." Erica's fingers clenched under the table. She didn't write yet. She just listened. Later that afternoon, they returned to the apartment. Darius was seated at the small kitchen table, pencil in hand, notebook open. He looked up when she entered, expression unreadable. "Hi," Erica said gently. He didn't respond, but he didn't turn away either. "Your mom says you can solve hard problems. Could I ask you something?" He looked down at his paper. "I brought a question," she said. From her bag, she pulled a printed equation, one that had circulated in elite research circles for years. A problem not easily accessible online. Something few outside PhD cohorts would even recognize. She placed it gently on the table. Darius stared at it for a long while, not with confusion but with familiarity, like someone handed him a half-finished song he already knew the melody to. "Do I need to write it out?" he asked, voice barely audible. "Whatever makes you comfortable," Erica said. He didn't write. Instead, he began to speak. And what came out was not guesswork, not trial and error, but fluid, logical, stunning clarity. Each step unfolded like a story, a mathematical rhythm. Erica couldn't understand it all. She wasn't trained for that, but she understood truth. And this was it. When he finished, Darius glanced up. "Was that it?" Erica blinked. "Yes. That was more than it." She stood quietly, walked to the window, and stared out at the street. The weight of what she had just witnessed sank into her bones like cold water. This wasn't a child who needed help. This was a mind the world wasn't ready for, and the system was trying to bury it. That night, Erica sat on the hotel bed, laptop balanced on her knees, and stared at the blinking cursor for nearly 30 minutes. She thought about every student she had written about, those suspended for hoodie colors, for disruptive posture, for asking too many questions. She remembered the mother in Brooklyn, who lost her job after standing up to a racist administrator, and the boy in Chicago whose scholarship was pulled after one wrong label in his file. And now this. A boy genius they wanted to erase because he didn't fit the template. Because he was quiet. Because he was black. Because they were scared of the proof he carried in his head. Erica cracked her knuckles. Then she began to type. The words flowed like fire. The boy genius. They tried to silence. She didn't lead with outrage. She led with evidence. The equation. The napkin. The leaked emails. The quote from a math chair at Cambridge, who called Darius a once-in-a-generation prodigy. She built the story layer by layer: quiet trauma, systemic racism, academic brilliance, and the soft-spoken boy, whose silence had become his shield. She included Tanisha's warnings, Darius's solutions, the school board's gag order, and at the center of it all, she painted Darius, not as a martyr, not as a miracle, but as a child. A child who had done nothing wrong but exist too powerfully in a space that wasn't designed for him. By 11:48 p.m., the piece was finished. At 11:59, her mouse hovered over publish. She hesitated, because she knew this would go viral. This would change things, and not everyone would celebrate it. Then she clicked. Midnight. The story went live. Within seconds, shares started pouring in. Thousands. Then tens of thousands. Activists, scholars, teachers, parents, even celebrities began reposting. The headline was electric. The boy genius they tried to silence. Underneath it, a photo of Darius's napkin, scanned in high resolution. Real. Undeniable. And by the time Erica closed her laptop, sat back, and exhaled, Her phone was already vibrating again. This time from an international number. A voice on the other end asked one question. Is he still in detention? Before Erica could answer, a knock echoed through her hotel room. She opened the door to find a man in a tailored suit holding a card with a government seal. He said, "We need to speak about the boy." When dawn broke over Charleston, it brought with it more than sun. It brought a storm. By 6:47 a.m., Darius Wynn was trending in every major city in America. By 7:10 it had reached the top spot on X, formerly Twitter. By 7:38 CNN had a banner segment cued, "Boy Genius Silenced, Racial Profiling or Academic Misunderstanding." And by 8:00 a.m., Low Country Middle was surrounded by something it had never seen before. Reporters, activists, satellite trucks, and silence-breaking signs that screamed in capital letters, "Black Minds Matter. Gifted. Not defiant. Educate. Don't erase." The campus, once sleepy and forgettable, now sat under the unflinching gaze of the nation. Inside the building, Principal Everett sat hunched over his desk, shirt collar loose, eyes flicking between a dozen email tabs, most marked urgent. His phone buzzed relentlessly. District heads, angry board members, panicked PR reps, even a call from a news anchor requesting comment before we run the segment with or without you. He was drowning. The narrative had escaped his control. He had tried spinning the story. He had authorized a bland press statement the night before, vaguely referencing a misunderstanding involving academic process. But that wasn't enough. Not against Erica Vann's article. Not against Darius's napkin. Not against the fury of a nation already tired of watching brilliant black children be criminalized before they're celebrated. Outside the school gates, the energy shifted from quiet concern to public demand. Protesters gathered. Parents, former students, professors, clergy, college kids. Chants filled the air, rhythmic and rising. "Free Darius Wynn. We see his mind. No more silence." A student had even set up a projector on the side of the school building, beaming the image of the napkin across the bricks. The equation glowed like a mural of resistance. Inside room 14B, Darius sat at his usual desk, but nothing felt usual anymore. He hadn't been told what happened. No one had explained the noise outside. The custodian had looked at him strangely that morning, like he was famous or dangerous, or both. A counselor peeked in briefly, whispered something to another staff member, then closed the door again like she was afraid of being seen near him. Only Miss Tally dared to sit beside him. "They know," she said softly. "Who?" "Everyone. The world." Darius blinked. "The napkin?" She nodded. "The article?" She nodded again. His eyes fell to the desk. "They're going to hate me now." "No," she said firmly. "They're going to see you." He didn't respond. He just stared at his hands, unsure what that visibility meant. For years, he'd survived by being invisible, and now the entire country had found him. Down the hall, in the main office, a secretary burst into Everett's office holding an envelope. "It's from CBS," she said breathlessly. "They want him. Today, live." Everett froze. "What do you mean, live?" "A special segment," she said, "airing this evening. American Minds. They want to fly him to Atlanta for a sit-down." Everett stood, jaw clenching. "No." She blinked. "Sir?" "No," he repeated. "He's a minor. We can't release him without clearance. It'll be chaos." "But his mother already signed the release," she said quietly. "She's waiting in the parking lot with a car." He paused. Everything inside him twisted. Panic, pride, fear, defensiveness. "This isn't a circus," he snapped. "This is a school. And he's still under academic review." "Academic review for what?" the secretary dared to ask. He glared. "For behavior inconsistent with classroom expectations." "You mean for being too smart?" He didn't answer. Because there was no answer. Not one that wouldn't sink him. He walked past her, storming through the corridor, pushing open the detention room door with a force that made both Tally and Darius flinch. "You're not leaving campus," he said flatly. Tally stood immediately. "You can't stop him." "I can, if he's still enrolled in under supervision," Everett barked. "This is district policy." "Then you're abusing policy." He ignored her. Turned to Darius. "There is a process, young man. You don't get to bypass it because the media has opinions." Darius looked at him, confused but calm. "I just want to go home," he said softly. "You've made this school a target," Everett snapped. "You've made me a target." Tally stepped between them. "You made yourself a target when you tried to erase his name." Just then the fire alarm blared. Everyone froze. Red strobes flashed across the ceiling. Everett swore under his breath. What now? But it wasn't a fire. It was a false pull, triggered by students protesting outside. And in that moment of chaos, while staff scrambled and students poured into the halls, Tanisha walked into the building with Erica Van beside her. She moved with quiet rage. Not yelling. Not flailing. Just walking directly toward room 1. "Excuse me," she said, brushing past Everett. "You have no authorization." "I am the authorization," she said. "I'm his mother." She reached for Darius's hand. He stood slowly. Everett blocked the door. "You take him now, you risk legal." "Then sue me," Tanisha said. Her voice didn't rise, but it cut sharper than any shout. "This school failed my son long before you tried to chain him to this desk." Erica Van raised her phone. Everett froze. He knew what that footage would look like. A mother being blocked from her child. A principal standing in front of a black boy, demanding obedience while protesters roared outside. He stepped aside. Tanisha took Darius's hand. Together, they walked out. The front doors opened to applause. Protesters parted. Camera crews turned. Someone held up a poster that he solved it in his head, but they still called him wrong. As Darius stepped into the sunlight, eyes wide at the flood of cameras, Erica leaned down. "You don't have to speak if you don't want to. I'm used to silence," he said quietly. "But now they're listening," she replied. And as they climbed into the car, a producer's voice buzzed through Erica's phone. "Tell them to pack light," he said. "We've got seats on the next flight to Atlanta." But just before the car pulls away, a school security officer rushes up with a clipboard in hand. "You need to see this," he says to Tanisha. On the paper, an emergency motion from the district, requesting legal guardianship review to stop Darius from being removed from school property. The motion stopped the car before it even moved. Tanisha stood frozen, fingers still touching the document, unable to believe what she was reading. A legal guardianship review, a school district attempting to intervene in custody, not because Darius was unsafe, or truant, or disruptive, but because they didn't want him leaving campus, didn't want him interviewed, didn't want him seen, because if he left, they lost control. The officer holding the document looked uncomfortable, not cruel, just caught in the middle. He cleared his throat. "Ma'am, the principal said you need to sign here before you take him off grounds." Tanisha didn't sign. She tore the paper in half. "We're leaving." Darius looked up at her, eyes wide. He had never seen his mother like this. Spine carved from iron, voice steady with something stronger than anger, something closer to truth. They got back in the car. But by then, police cruisers were pulling up near the curb. Not with lights, not aggressively, but present, watching, reminding everyone that visibility was a double-edged sword. Erica spoke quietly. "If we force this, they'll twist it." Tanisha closed her eyes, not in defeat, but calculation. "Then we're not forcing it today," she said. "We regroup, and we watch their next move." She squeezed Darius's hand. "We're not done." He nodded once. It was all he needed. They didn't go home. The district issued an emergency temporary education reassignment, a cold phrase for a brutal truth. Darius was to be kept on campus, removed from peers, placed under independent review. He was isolated again. Room 14B had become something uglier now. Not detention, not even punishment, containment. The walls seemed narrower this time. No notebook, no textbooks, no chalkboard, not even worksheets anymore. Just blank paper, as if his mind could be erased the way the school tried to erase his reputation. The windows were narrow and high, barely enough to see the sky. If he pressed his ear against the wall, he could hear foot traffic from the hallway. Voices, laughter, lockers slamming shut, life going on around him. But he was not part of it. He was trapped in the same way his father had been, locked away while the world debated what to call him. The silence pressed against him. He thought of numbers like old friends, the ones who understood him more than people ever did. He whispered equations in his head, patterns, exponential arcs, shifting variables, until the quiet stopped feeling like suffocation and started to feel like space. Still, this time it hurt more, because this time, the world knew his name. And they left him here anyway. At lunch, a hall monitor slipped inside. The boy couldn't speak. He looked terrified, but he slid something onto Darius's desk. A folded piece of notebook paper. Then he left without a word. Darius opened it. It was a note. The handwriting was messy, rushed, written fast to avoid detection. They can't stop you. We all saw the article. You're a genius. Keep going. No signature. He folded it and tucked it into his sock. An hour later, another student found a way to crack the door open and shove something inside. Another note, this one reading, "Teach me." No name, just a request. By the end of the day, he had 5 notes. One said, "You're the only reason to be proud of this school." Another, "My brother goes here next year. I hope they don't silence him too." And then one that made him swallow hard. "My dad says genius is a threat when it's black, but I think it's hope." He stared at that one the longest.
The school board didn't know these notes existed.
Everett didn't know students were slipping past protocols, using shared bathroom breaks as drop points, creating a silent network of support across lockers and hallway corners. That's what happens when adults try to stop truth. Kids build their own secret language to keep it alive. But while the students found ways to reach him, the adults found ways to tighten their grip. The next day, room 14B changed. His desk was gone, replaced with a single plastic chair. The windows were covered with white paper. And the door, locked. Not from the inside, from the outside. He sat alone, knees pulled close, trying to make sense of the new rules. Trying to breathe through them. Trying not to break. The silence thickened, and a faint buzzing sound broke it. Not from the hallway. Not from the intercom. From outside. Darius stood, moved toward the window, pressed his palm to the covered glass. The buzzing grew louder. Then something tapped the glass. Once. Twice. Not a bird. Not a branch. A shadow. Mechanical. He reached up, carefully peeling back a corner of the white paper. His eyes widened. A drone. Small, black, hovering outside the third-story window. It dropped something. A thud against the sill. Then it flew away. Darius stared at the object. A soft-bound book with a red cover. Someone had tied it with twine. He checked the hallway. No one. He climbed onto the chair, pushed the window just high enough, and pulled the book inside. It was heavy, real, worn at the edges. A math textbook, one he had never seen before. Not a school edition, not a student edition, a graduate edition, from MIT Press. He flipped it open. Pages filled with dense theory, symbols, approaches, proofs, some he knew intuitively, some he didn't yet, all alive with possibility. And then a sheet of lined paper slipped from inside the cover. Folded once. He opened it. It said, "We know. We see you. Keep solving. Emma T. is watching." No signature. No initials. Just a message. For him. Darius pressed the note between his fingers, feeling something he hadn't felt in days. Not safety. Not quite. But something like momentum. Like forward motion. Like someone had just opened a door where the school had nailed every window shut. He sat down with the book. And for the first time since room 14B swallowed him, he smiled. He didn't speak. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He read. He began solving problems no teacher here could pronounce. He wrote not on worksheets, but on the back of the drone wrapping, turning it into a page of brilliant logic. He filled his silence with possibility, and the isolation, slowly, became something else.
Not a cage.
A proving ground. Outside the school, reporters showed up again. But now they weren't alone. College students, professors, civil rights organizers, church leaders, musicians, kids holding posters, parents holding legal banners. From a megaphone came a single chant, repeated over and over. Free his mind. Free his future. Inside, Principal Everett watched the protest grow. Not just in size, in purpose. This wasn't a moment anymore. It was a movement, and he was on the wrong side. He called the district office. Again. "They're escalating," he said. "No." The superintendent said. "You escalated. You should have let the boy go home." Everett stared at the phone, and finally understood. He wasn't protecting the district. He was exposing it. Night came, and Darius was still in the room. Sitting on the floor now, back against the wall, eyes fixed on another proof, another problem, another structure only he could see clearly. He reached into his sock and unfolded the first note. Then the second. Then the third. He laid them all out on the floor, like pieces of a puzzle. Sometimes, silence wasn't survival anymore. Sometimes, silence was strategy. Outside, the chants continued. Inside, a boy kept building a universe in his head. The school had taken everything from him. Books, freedom, space. But not the one thing they didn't understand. His mind. And as moonlight cut across the locked room floor, illuminating the red-covered MIT book. Darius whispered a single line, his voice barely breath but full of quiet certainty. They can't stop the math. Just then, a phone buzzed outside the door. A voice whispered urgently. They moved up the decision. In the morning, they want to transfer him out of the district entirely. And at that same moment, hundreds of miles away, MIT's theoretical mathematics department sent one email to the Charleston School Board. We believe this student is doing work comparable to our doctoral candidates. If you do not release him by tomorrow, we will. The letter didn't come with warning. No headline, no conference call, no district memo. It arrived as a scanned PDF in the inbox of Charleston Unified's legal counsel at 6:12 a.m., quietly attached to an email marked, "Urgent legal action imminent." The subject line was plain. Wynn v. Charleston Unified, discriminatory action threat assessment. But what lived inside that document would shake the foundation of the entire district. Drafted by a coalition of civil rights attorneys from 4 different states, North Carolina, Georgia, New York, and Illinois, it was a carefully calibrated time bomb. 4 pages of undeniable facts, strategic legal precedent, and thinly veiled threat. The summary paragraph read like a sledgehammer. If the district does not, within 72 hours, reverse the unlawful suspension, issue a formal apology, and facilitate a full return to academic normalcy for the minor child known as Darius Wynn, including access to honors curriculum and independent mentorship, the undersigned will proceed with a multi-jurisdictional lawsuit, citing racial discrimination, educational obstruction, psychological harm, and civil rights suppression under federal statute. And beneath that were 15 signatures, lawyers from national organizations, scholars who had represented school desegregation cases, even a former deputy from the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. The message was clear. This wasn't about school discipline anymore. This was about legacy, about justice, about making a very public example of a system that tried to silence brilliance because it came wrapped in brown skin and quiet defiance. Superintendent Margot Whitman read it 3 times before her hands stopped shaking. She called Principal Everett immediately. "We've got a problem," she said. Everett's voice cracked through the line. "It's escalating." "No," she snapped. "It's exploded." He tried to offer reassurance. "We can issue a new statement, clarify our intentions." Whitman cut him off. "You're not issuing anything. From this moment forward, you are under directive. You don't speak to media. You don't speak to staff. You don't breathe unless legal signs off." "Understood." But it wasn't enough, because someone had already leaked the letter. By noon, Erica Vann published it in full. No edits, no redaction, just raw power. Her article read, "The legal letter that could cost Charleston Unified millions and dismantle decades of bias." Within 20 minutes, the site crashed from traffic. Within an hour, a national TV network announced they were sending a van to broadcast live from the school gates. Within 2 hours, major civil rights figures began reposting the threat letter with one unified phrase, "Let the boy go." Inside Low Country Middle, the energy shifted again. Students weren't whispering anymore. They were watching, on phones, on live streams. Some wore pins with Darius's initials. Others had printed shirts with his napkin design stretched across the chest like a badge. The school couldn't contain it anymore. Darius wasn't just a student. He was a movement. In room 114B, he sat still, but not defeated. The MIT book was hidden beneath the desk now, wrapped in his hoodie. He hadn't spoken to a staff member in nearly 2 days. No one dared enter the room anymore. Not after the drone incident. Not after the chants outside started including his name. And yet no one told him what was happening. No one had told him about the letter. No one had told him that the world was fighting for him. He thought he was still alone, until the intercom buzzed. "Darius Wynn, please report to the front of the building." His breath caught. Not office. Not detention. The front of the building. He walked through the halls slowly, unsure if it was a trick, unsure if cameras would be waiting, unsure if another punishment had been crafted with a new name. But as he turned the corner, he saw her, his mother, Tanisha, standing outside the building's glass double doors, one hand clutching her purse, and the other gripping the napkin. She held it carefully, unfolded fully, backed by the weight of a nation now watching her every move. Next to her stood Erica Vann, and beside Erica, a camera crew, a mic, a reporter in a navy blue blazer, holding an index card with bullet points. She no longer needed, because this story didn't need scripting. Darius stepped out. Tanisha locked eyes with him and smiled. Not with triumph, not with bitterness, but with clarity. A mother finally standing in the sun, with her child after years of telling him to survive in the dark. "Come here, baby," she said softly. He walked to her. The reporter's voice cut through the crowd. "We're here live at Low Country Middle School, in Charleston, where the story of 13-year-old math prodigy Darius Wynn has sparked national attention and a legal showdown with the local district. His mother, Tanisha Wynn, has just joined us with new documents." The camera panned down. To the napkin. To the story that started it all. Tanisha unfolded it slowly, holding it up to the camera like a sacred scroll. "This is what they tried to bury," she said. The reporter moved the mic closer. "Ms. Wynn, what do you want people to know right now?" She looked directly into the lens. "That they tried to label my son defiant, difficult, disruptive. But this," she held the napkin higher. "This is the truth they were afraid of. Not because he was dangerous, but because he was smarter than they were ready for." Darius stood beside her, not saying a word. But the message didn't need sound. The math had already spoken. The broadcast went viral within minutes. Clips circulated on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, with captions like, "She held the napkin like it was holy. This boy solved the unsolvable, and they punished him for it. We don't protect black genius. We isolate it." By the time the interview ended, the crowd outside the school had tripled. News fans lined the street. The National Black Educators Alliance posted a formal endorsement of Darius and began drafting a mentorship proposal. The NAACP Youth Council offered to sponsor his transfer. A university in California publicly offered his mother a relocation package and full scholarship for Darius, with no application. But back inside the district building, chaos reigned. Superintendent Whitman slammed her hand on the table in the emergency session. "We should have de-escalated earlier," she growled. Board President Grantham muttered. "We underestimated the journalist." Whitman turned to legal. "What are our options now?" A long pause. Then the legal advisor spoke. "We have two. Go on. Settle quietly. Reinstate the boy. Issue a public apology. And hope the attention fades. And the other? We fight it. Claim misunderstanding. Push for internal review. Risk public backlash. And the full weight of civil rights litigation." Grantham exhaled slowly. "What's your recommendation?" The advisor looked grim. "Option 1. If this goes to court, we lose. If it hits national TV again, we become the case study of everything wrong in American education." No one spoke for a full minute. Then Grantham stood. "Fine. Prepare the statement. But I'm not apologizing personally." Whitman stared out the window. Too late, she thought. This wasn't about apology anymore. It was about reckoning. Just as the school board finishes reviewing their draft apology, an intern rushes into the conference room. Eyes wide. "There's a new post from MIT's official account. It says, 'We're offering Darius Wynn a seat in our Young Scholars program. Effective immediately. No application needed.' And underneath it, a scanned copy of the napkin, signed in the corner, by 3 MIT professors. The press statement was never enough. Not after the napkin went viral again. This time with 3 verified MIT faculty signatures neatly inked at the bottom. Each vouching for the genius of the boy Charleston tried to erase. Not after the apology was drafted, scrubbed, rewritten 3 times, and still couldn't erase the image of Tanisha holding the napkin like scripture in front of a nation. And especially not after the audio leaked. The first voice on the recording was unmistakable. Board President Lois Grantham. "We have to get ahead of this narrative," she said, voice clipped, brittle. "It's not about the math. It's about the manipulation. That mother, she's crafting a media campaign." There was a rustling of papers. Then another voice. Superintendent Whitman. "She's too polished," Whitman said. "I think she rehearsed those lines with the reporter." "You think the kid actually wrote that napkin?" A third voice asked, male. Dismissive, with a smirk audible even through the static. There was a pause. Then low laughter. Grantham spoke again. "We don't even know if he solved it without help. No proof he didn't just copy it." Whitman added. "We need to verify that the solution originated with him. Publicly. Discreetly." The conversation went on. Cold. Calculated. Not once did anyone ask about Darius's well-being. Not once did they speak of his isolation, his potential, or his future. Only risk. Only optics. Only damage control. The recording, 26 minutes long, was leaked anonymously to a podcast called The Class Divide, known for exposing educational corruption. They released the full audio unedited, their host's intro barely lasting 5 seconds before cutting straight to the board's voices plotting behind closed doors. It spread like wildfire. Hashtags ignited all over again. They tried to erase him. Let Darius speak. Black genius matters. Within hours, the damage deepened. A trending tweet read, "They didn't doubt the math, only that a black boy could have done it alone." Civil rights attorney Raven Chandler, who had signed the original legal letter, appeared on Anderson Cooper 360 that night. "This isn't just administrative failure," she said. "This is ideological violence. They didn't want to nurture him. They wanted to punish him. For being smarter. For being black. For not staying small." Charleston Unified tried to spin it. A new statement was issued, distancing the district from unauthorized private conversations. Grantham didn't appear on camera. Whitman disappeared from public view entirely. But it wasn't enough. Because truth was now coming from places they couldn't control. 2 days after the leaked audio, the unexpected happened. A hacker group known only as Shade Code, previously responsible for whistleblower drops on student surveillance systems, published a new data leak. It hit just after 3 a.m. A 400-megabyte folder titled, "Wynn."
Folder. He deserved better.
Inside were thousands of internal emails from Charleston Unified's administrative servers. And buried in the chain, one thread that changed everything. It was a discussion between the district's data specialist, a deputy principal, and a member of the board's legal team. The subject line, reclassification of grade records. Wynn, Darius J. The emails spanned 3 days. They were subtle, but damning. One email read, "Per directive, ensure his math placement file is marked incomplete. Recommend adjusting course level to reflect behavioral history, just in case this escalates further." Another, already downgraded Algebra 2 progress note. "Will delay gifted referral for Q3 to avoid optics. Please advise on narrative framing if queried." They altered his academic records. They buried his math scores. They rewrote his future with a few keystrokes. The screenshots hit Reddit first. Then Twitter. Then CNN. By morning, it was national. And it broke something. Not just trust, but illusion. That school boards were neutral. That public systems were built to protect every child. That exceptionalism would be enough to override race. Tanisha saw the emails on a friend's phone. She didn't speak. She just sat at the kitchen table, Darius's napkin laid in front of her, and cried into her hands. Not because she was surprised, but because she had hoped. And now hope felt like betrayal. In Boston, MIT's admissions office released a rare follow-up statement. "We stand by our invitation to Darius Wynn, and we will continue to support his education, regardless of what appears on his public record." In a private message to Erica Van, one professor wrote, "It's clear now. This was never about misunderstanding. It was sabotage." Back in Charleston, students at Low Country staged a walkout. They poured out of classrooms wearing black. Some carried signs with nothing but equations. Others held homemade napkins, scribbled with math and the words, "He solved it. You failed." Inside room 14B, Darius sat alone again. The lights were still on. The desk was still stripped bare. But he was different now. He was no longer invisible. He was proof. Living, breathing, undeniable proof. The door opened quietly. It was Miss Talley. She walked in with trembling hands, holding something behind her back. "Darius," she whispered, "you need to see this." She placed a tablet in front of him. On the screen, the shade code leak. His name, his grades, the emails, every lie, now visible. Darius stared at it, unmoving. Then slowly he placed his hand over the screen. "Why?" he asked. His voice was soft, but broken. "They couldn't believe you were real," she said. "So they tried to rewrite you." He nodded slowly, not because he understood, but because he had seen it before, with his father, with the police, with the silence. "They think I cheated," he said again, more to himself this time. "No," Tally said. "They just couldn't handle that you didn't need them." He looked up at her.
"Will they take MIT away?"
"No," she said. "They can't." Then she pulled something else from her bag. A flash drive. It was labeled in black Sharpie. "Proof. I found your original assessments," she said. "The ones before they changed them. I saved them when I noticed things disappearing." He stared at it. A tiny thing. But so powerful. You're going to need it, she said. For what? She smiled. For the hearing. He blinked. Hearing? Tally nodded. Tomorrow morning. Live streamed. Open to the public. You'll get to speak. They can't silence you anymore. Darius stared at the flash drive in his hand. And this time when he looked up, his eyes were not afraid. They were steady, certain. They wanted to punish me, he said. But now everyone sees why. As the hearing prepares to open the next morning, Shadecode posts again. One final leak. Video surveillance from inside the school office. And in the clip, a district official is caught on tape whispering, "If this gets out, we'll lose everything." That boy? He's dangerous. Because he's undeniable. Principal Everett Halbridge hadn't slept in 3 days. Not really. He'd closed his eyes. Sure. Laid in bed in the house he mortgaged for. Let the hum of the ceiling fan spin above him, while his wife murmured worried prayers beside him. But rest never came. Not since the leak. Not since the napkin. Not since the boy he'd dismissed with a policy code became a national symbol of everything broken in the very institution he claimed to uphold. He used to believe he was the good guy. The kind of principal who followed the rules, who didn't take sides, who let the data speak. But now the data was screaming, and it had his fingerprints all over it. The emails. The grade changes. The classified recordings. The image of Darius Wynn holding up that napkin with tears and fire in her eyes. And now the Shadecode video. The surveillance footage from his own office. It was him, plain as day, saying words he didn't even remember saying. If this gets out, we'll lose everything. That boy, he's dangerous. Because he's undeniable. That clip had been viewed 5.2 million times in 24 hours. And suddenly, there were no more meetings, no more memos, only silence, cold and stinging. Even the board had gone quiet, most of them holed up, trying to shield themselves from the collapse. But Everett couldn't hide. He kept hearing Darius's voice in his head. Not loud, not angry, just soft, earnest. Even when I have the right answers, it always was the point. That boy wasn't disruptive. He was right. And the system couldn't handle it. So Everett did what he'd never done in his 2 decades in education. He told the truth. He sat alone in his office with a laptop and recorded a video. No PR team. No edits. Just one. He looked into the camera. His shirt wrinkled. His voice low. My name is Everett Halbridge. I've been the principal of Low Country Middle for 8 years. And I have failed. He paused. Swallowed. We removed Darius Wynn from the classroom not because he cheated. Not because he was disruptive. But because he didn't fit the profile of a gifted student. He let the words hang there. I was part of a decision-making process rooted in bias. A process that saw a quiet black boy solving equations beyond our comprehension, and chose suspicion instead of support. He inhaled sharply. I told myself I was protecting order, but I was protecting comfort. I was protecting whiteness. And He ended the video, posted it to his private YouTube channel, shared it to no one. But the internet found it anyway. And within hours it was everywhere.
The principal confession.
I protected whiteness. Charleston principal comes clean. Educator breaks ranks. Admits systemic bias against black student. Teachers reposted it. Students dissected it. Activists turned it into a rallying cry. And Darius Wynn, he watched it from the same chair he'd been sitting in for days. Alone in room 14B, the MIT book still at his side. He didn't cheer. He didn't smirk. He just whispered to himself. Finally, the confession forced the district's hand. The hearing, already set for that morning, became a formality. MIT's public pressure. The legal threat. The Shadecode leaks. Now the principal's own admission. There was nothing left to argue. Charleston Unified released a statement by 7:30 a.m. Effective immediately, Darius Wynn is reinstated to full academic participation. We acknowledge the harm caused. An external audit of our gifted program and administrative practices will begin next week. But the statement wasn't enough, because the district wanted redemption. So they staged a return. Televised. Scripted. Controlled. At 9:00 a.m., news vans lined the school lot again. Teachers were told to gather. Students ushered into hallways. Cameramen given passes to film. Darius was brought in through the side door, flanked by Erica Van and Miss Tally. Tanisha walked slightly behind him, face unreadable. He wasn't allowed to speak. Not yet. The stage was set in the main auditorium. A podium stood center stage, backed by the district banner. To its left, 3 chairs. One for Darius, one for the superintendent, one for the school board rep. As Darius stepped into the lights, a hush fell over the room. He wore a simple white shirt, sleeves slightly too long. No fanfare, no press badge, just a boy returning to a school that tried to erase him. The superintendent gave a statement calculated, respectful, dry. We acknowledge the errors made. We welcome Darius back. The board rep echoed sentiments about reflection, opportunity, and restorative practices. Then it was Darius's turn. The mic was lowered. He stepped forward. The room held its breath. He looked out, not at the cameras but at the students. The ones who had slipped him notes. The ones who walked out for him. He didn't thank the district. He didn't mention the scandal. He simply said, "I just wanted to learn."
Silence.
Then, I was told to stay quiet to be safe. But it didn't protect me. Being right didn't protect me. Only you did. He looked toward his peers, and something passed between them. Something wordless but real. Then he stepped back. Applause erupted, not the kind staged for TV. The kind that meant everything. But as Darius walked off stage, escorted back through the side hall, a reporter caught Erica by the sleeve. "Will he return to this school permanently?" Erica paused. Tanisha answered, "No. He's going to MIT. Eventually," she said. "But first he's going to rest. Because survival wasn't enough anymore. Darius deserved more than endurance. He deserved peace." As the final camera shut off, a student in the back of the auditorium pulled out their phone and showed a video to friends. It was a new shade code post. Caption: "We're not done yet." The footage? A spreadsheet listing dozens of other gifted black students in Charleston who had been removed from advanced placement programs in the past 5 years. The auditorium lights were too bright for comfort. But Darius didn't flinch. His eyes scanned the stage like it was a chessboard, not a spotlighted arena for spectacle. Cameras lined the aisles. Producers whispered into headsets. In the wings, anchors stood with rehearsed excitement in their voices, ready to spin this into a feel-good segment. But Darius knew better. This wasn't about feel-good. This was about proving he belonged in a space that had once locked him in silence. The segment was called America's Mind. It was normally reserved for viral inventors, teen robotics champs, chess phenoms. Never before had it featured a kid who was pulled out of class for solving math too fast. Never had it highlighted a child whose brilliance threatened authority more than it impressed it. The rules were simple. 1 advanced problem. 1 hour. No calculators. No notes. The catch? It was a live broadcast. National. International. Syndicated to over 100 outlets. The producers didn't know it, but Darius had already solved harder problems while locked in room 14B with nothing but his thoughts. They gave him the problem on a digital board, not written in numbers, but symbols, the type of combinatorial geometry only found in doctoral-level seminars. It was an equation built not to be solved, but to watch someone fail solving it. They didn't want a boy who could finish the problem. They wanted drama. He gave them silence. The countdown clock glowed above him. Darius sat still, didn't blink, didn't touch the screen, just stared. The host tried to fill time. "This is Darius Wynn, a 13-year-old student from Charleston, South Carolina, whose story has captured the nation. Removed from class for being too advanced, he now stands before us with the world watching." The crowd applauded politely. The camera zoomed in. 53. Still Darius didn't move. He was mapping. In his mind, the numbers weren't just tools. They were voices, threads, forms. They told him how they connected. They whispered where to look. Where others saw chaos, he saw patterns. Space folded, dimensions layered, variables danced. He wasn't scared. He was home. 47th. He picked up the stylus, wrote one symbol, then another, then stopped again. He wasn't calculating. He was listening. Not to the room, but to the shape of the math. In the control booth, one of the producers turned to Erica Van. "Is he nervous?" She smirked. "He's solving it backwards." "What?" "He's already there. He's just choosing how to show you." "Us." The crowd shifted. Murmurs. Nervous energy. A few doubters in the back shook their heads. "He's stuck." He cracked under pressure. "He's just a kid." 40s. Darius stood, walked over to the board, and in exactly 2 minutes and 17 seconds, he solved the problem. Every step, every proof, line after line flowed out of him like poetry. Perfect structure, elegant logic, no wasted movement. No shortcuts. He didn't even look up. Just tapped the final answer and turned. The room went silent. For a beat. Then, eruption. Not polite applause. A standing ovation. Thunder. A wave of sound that shook the studio walls. Erica leaned against the side rail and exhaled for the first time in 20 minutes. Tanisha cried openly. The host ran on stage, barely hiding her shock. Darius, how did you do that? He looked at her, calm as ever. I solved it in my head first, he said softly. Why wait so long to start? I was listening. To what? He pointed at the board. To the problem. Laughter. Applause again. But it wasn't noise this time. It was witnessing. Then the host turned serious. We have something for you. She reached for a white envelope from the podium. I wasn't supposed to read this until the end of the segment, she said. But I think the moment calls for it. She unfolded the letter. It reads, on behalf of the University of Oxford's Department of Mathematical Sciences, we are pleased to offer Darius Wynn a full academic scholarship to our Early Scholars program. The crowd gasped.
Not MIT.
Not Harvard.
Oxford. Across an ocean. A global stage. Tanisha's hand flew to her mouth. Darius blinked once, but didn't speak. The host continued. This isn't just honorary. This is real. Fully funded. Whenever he's ready. The applause swelled again. But Darius turned not to the cameras, not to the crowd, to the backstage hallway, where a group of kids from his school stood watching. Kids who had slipped him notes. Kids who had worn pins with his name. Kids who looked like him. He walked toward them. One reached out, eyes wide. You actually did it, the boy said. Darius nodded. You could too. Another girl stepped forward. They said you were lying. He smiled gently. Now they can't. The cameras caught it. The moment where Darius Wynn finally allowed to shine, used the moment not to talk about himself, but to give it away. Later, Erica Van would call it the quietest revolution in broadcast history. But the story wasn't over, because as the final credits rolled, a producer rushed onto the stage, with a phone. She whispered into the host's ear, eyes wide. The host turned to the cameras, forced to improvise. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just getting this now. Another statement has been released. She tapped her earpiece. This one is from the Office of the Secretary of Education. The screen behind them lit up. Effective immediately, we are launching a nationwide audit of public school gifted programs to identify and address racial disparities in placement, referral, and removal. The catalyst for this effort is the case of Darius Wynn. The crowd gasped. The kids backstage cheered.
But Darius?
He just nodded once, then whispered, Good. As Darius steps off stage, a quiet stranger in a tailored coat approaches him. I've been following your work, he said. He hands Darius a card. No title, just a logo, a spiral inside a circle. I'm from the Institute. We work in the shadows. You've solved something we thought lost. Darius stares, and on the back of the card, one question is printed. Ready to change everything? The world moved fast after the broadcast. Too fast. Within 48 hours of solving the problem live on national television, Darius Wynn's name was on every major outlet. The Guardian, Le Monde, Al Jazeera. MIT updated their official site with a dedicated profile labeled Wynn Fellow, even though the ink on the offer hadn't dried. Harvard's chair of mathematics called personally. Oxford followed up with a handwritten letter. A university in Japan requested a remote collaboration on sequence mapping. But while the world celebrated his mind, no one asked about his mother's hands. Hands that once scrubbed floors at 3 a.m. just to keep the lights on. Hands that gripped steering wheels through years of tension-filled commutes, passing cop cars with her heart held in her throat. Hands that shook while holding that napkin, proof of her son's genius and her own vindication. Tanisha Wynn didn't like the cameras. She hated the labels. Strong black mother, warrior woman, protector of a prodigy. All she had ever wanted was for her son to be seen and safe. Now he was the first, but not the second. Because with every door that opened for Darius, new eyes tracked their every move. He was no longer just a boy from Charleston. He was a brand, a symbol, a battle cry for activists and academics alike. Yet at home, nothing was simple. Their mailbox filled with letters from strangers, some offering scholarships, others offering mentorship, and a few not offering anything at all. Threats, Bible verses weaponized as warnings, accusations that his mind was unnatural. that he was a plant, a hoax, an AI stunt. Darius didn't flinch, but Tanisha saw it in his posture, the way he leaned in less during conversations. How his laugh came slower. How he spent hours at the window, watching the neighborhood, as if waiting for the next wrong knock. The day the Harvard letter arrived, Tanisha held it for 5 hours before handing it to him. A full ride. Early admission. Housing. Meals. Mentorship with Dr. Anita Marrow, the youngest black woman ever tenured in their department. Darius read the letter once, folded it carefully, and placed it under his bed. "Don't you want to tell someone?" she asked. He shook his head. Not yet. He wasn't ungrateful. He was just tired. Fame, he had learned, was a spotlight that burned just as fast as it illuminated, and the wound it came from hadn't healed. His father was still in prison. 3 years in, and still no movement. Still no expungement. Still no justice. The pro bono lawyers were slow. The system was slower. Every time Darius visited, the guards gave him a second glance. Sometimes a third. They'd ask, "You that math kid?" and then frisk him twice. His father, Darius Wynn, wore a smile that never reached his eyes. He'd watch Darius explain research from a French institute, and nod politely, but his hands would twitch in his lap. He didn't want to hear about genius while sitting behind glass. "They love you now," he once said. "But don't think they'll stop watching." Darius nodded. He already knew. So instead of reveling in his new world, he began building something quietly beneath it. He started mentoring. First, 2 kids from his old school. Both shy, both brilliant, both black. Then 5 more from other schools. Kids who had been suspended for disruptive behaviors that were really just faster thinking or quiet resistance. He helped them see their patterns, their logic, their gifts. They called themselves the Silent Sequence. No official club, no funding, just stolen hours on Zoom, napkins with math scribbles sent through scanned PDFs, and a secret Google Drive folder that one kid nicknamed the lab. It gave Darius peace. Purpose. If the system had nearly crushed him, maybe he could keep others from being cracked open by the same weight. Erica Van visited one day, recorder off not as a journalist but as a friend. "You're creating something," she said. "You know that, right?" "It's not just about math," he replied. "It's about protection." She nodded. That's what education should have been from the start. Still, for all the growth, the headlines, the invitations, Darius couldn't shake the feeling that none of it was whole. That no degree, no applause, no article could change what they'd tried to take from him. It's why he didn't post the Harvard letter, didn't pose for the scholarships, didn't celebrate. He was still carrying something. That morning, while studying alone at the community library, a librarian approached him with a thick envelope. "No postage," she said. Someone dropped it off, said it was special. He opened it slowly. Inside, a black folder, embossed with gold trim. At the top, the Office of Public Engagement, Executive Branch, and beneath it, a single page, typed, formal, signed in blue ink. "You are invited to deliver a personal address at the White House Youth Summit on Educational Equity. We believe your voice and your story are essential to the future we want to build. No cameras, no press tour, just an ask, a seat at the table." Tanisha read it twice, then looked at her son. "What do you think?" Darius stared at the page. "I think they finally believe I exist." She didn't say yes or no, she didn't push. She just said, "If you go, make them remember why." 2 days later, while preparing his remarks, Darius receives a strange package. No return address, no name. Inside, a single folded page. A new equation. Unsolved, handwritten. And at the bottom, a message. "This is only the beginning. We've been waiting for you." The auditorium at the White House was unlike anything Darius Wynn had ever stepped into. The floor gleamed like polished glass. The ceiling stretched upward into intricate carvings, and the seats were lined with scholars, politicians, educators, and student leaders from every state. The Youth Summit on Educational Equity had never opened with a student speaker, until now. He wasn't there to impress them. He was there to remind them. Tanisha sat in the front row, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. On either side of her sat representatives from MIT, Harvard, and Oxford. Not a single one spoke. They knew this moment didn't belong to them. Darius adjusted the mic, his voice soft but unwavering. "When I was 10, a teacher told my mom I had a compliance issue. I didn't talk much, didn't raise my hand. I just like to solve problems in my head. A small chuckle from the back. Nervous. Relatable. He continued. When I was 13, they pulled me out of class. Said I cheated. Said I didn't act like a gifted kid. Said I needed to be monitored. No chuckles now. Just silence. I didn't yell. I didn't fight. I just listened. That's what we're taught, right? Be quiet. Be respectful. Be small. He looked out into the crowd. I stayed small. And they erased me anyway. Every camera zoomed in. No notes in his hand. No teleprompter. Just memory. And then I solved something. On a napkin. In detention. Because I needed to feel like I still existed. He paused. His breath steady. But this isn't about me. Not really. He scanned the rows of faces. It's about the girl in Alabama, who's told she's too loud for honors English. The boy in Oregon labeled emotionally unstable because he reads ahead in math. The student in Texas who gets pulled out of AP chemistry because her accent is too thick. He leaned in.
There are millions like me. You just have to look.
Tanisha wiped her eyes. The room remained frozen. Journalists scribbled. Advisors nodded. A senator mouthed. Wow, without realizing they were being filmed. Darius stepped back from the podium. No grand finale. No applause cue. Just presence. He didn't need to shout to be heard. He never had. And when the applause came, it wasn't explosive. It was reverent. The kind of applause reserved for something you want to remember, not just admire. Backstage, dozens of students waited to meet him. Most were gifted students of color. A few were teachers. Some were parents. They handed him letters, thanked him, took photos. But one child didn't approach him right away. She stood off to the side, no more than 8, her hair tied in 2 tight braids, clutching a folded piece of paper. Darius noticed her. Kneeled. Hi, he said. She didn't speak. Just handed him the note. It read, I solve things too, but they keep telling me to stop showing off. He looked up. What's your name? She whispered. Amara. He smiled. I used to think I was showing off too. But you're not. You're showing them what they missed. Amara nodded. Then, without a word, she reached into her backpack and pulled out a napkin. Darius unfolded it slowly. It wasn't correct. Not yet. But it was close. He looked at her again. You want help finishing this? She smiled wide. Can I? He tapped his temple. Start here. In your head. Don't rush. The answer's waiting for you. Behind them, cameras kept flashing. But this moment wasn't for the world. It was for Amara. And for the boy Darius had once been. That night, the clip of his speech aired on every major network. The hashtags returned. But the narrative had changed. Not a victim. Not a scandal. Not a genius novelty. A visionary. His speech was included in education policy reviews. It was played at teacher trainings. School districts across the country cited his story when rewriting their gifted criteria. One headline from The Atlantic read, The boy who changed what genius looks like. But at home, Darius stayed grounded. He still mentored his sequence. Still kept his napkin. Still avoided the spotlight when asked by a Harvard reporter what the biggest lesson had been, he replied, Silence is not absence. Some of us are just thinking before we speak. Tanisha laughed when she heard that. He's always been that way, she told them, even when nobody listened. But now, everyone was listening. And not just to Darius. To students like Amara. To voices once silenced under the weight of bias. To brilliance that no longer needed permission to shine. Back in his room, Darius places Amara's napkin beside his own. Suddenly his phone buzzes. It's from the institute. Just coordinates. A private math summit. Hidden. Invitation only. And a final message. Bring the girl. If you've ever been overlooked, silenced, or told you were too much, just for being yourself, then you already know Darius's pain. No child should have to shrink to survive. No genius should be punished for shining. Type yes if you believe brilliance has no color. Subscribe if this broke your heart.